Shadows in the kitchen. The scent of baked bread drifted through the wide halls of Whitmore Manor, mingling with the faint aroma of wood smoke. Edward Whitmore stood at the threshold of the kitchen, a man of 40 whose presence commanded quiet respect in town. His estate, though vast and orderly, had grown cold in the years since his wife Margaret's passing. He had learned to live with silence, yet the kitchen, the one place alive with the clatter of pans and low hum of conversation, always drew him. Clara Evans, his cook, worked at the long oak table with a quiet diligence. She was not loud, nor particularly cheerful, but there was a steady grace in the way she kneaded dough, as though every movement concealed some deeper effort to keep life together. Her daughter, Lily, hovered nearby with a basket of apples. 14, slight and pale, the girl's watchful eyes suggested she had learned to measure every adult's mood before speaking. Edward's gaze, however, had fixed on something else, the faint discoloration along Clara's wrist as she stretched across the table. He said nothing at first, thinking it a kitchen accident, perhaps a burn or bruise from lifting a pot. But when Lily shifted the basket into the light, he saw the same shadowed marks on the child's arm. The image rooted him to the spot. "Are you well, Mrs. Evans?" His voice broke the stillness. Clara startled slightly, then forced a smile, tucking her sleeve lower. "Yes, sir. Just clumsy as ever." The answer was too practiced, too smooth. Edward felt the sharp tug of unease but did not press further. He knew Clara as a woman of pride. She had come into his service years ago after the death of her mother, always discreet, never seeking pity. Still, the bruise lingered in his thoughts like a stubborn stain. Lily, sensing his eyes upon her, quickly shifted behind her mother's skirts. "I'll take these to the cellar," she murmured. Edward stepped aside as she passed, her small frame tense as if carrying more than a basket. He noticed how she avoided looking at him, as though ashamed. That night, Edward sat alone in his study, the fire low, his glass of brandy untouched. His mind returned again and again to those bruises. Perhaps he should have ignored them. Domestic affairs were not his concern. But the echo of Margaret's voice, long gone yet still clear in memory, seemed to rise from the shadows. "Do not turn from suffering, Edward. If you see it, you bear a part of it." The following morning, the town buzzed with its usual gossip at the marketplace. Edward, known for his restraint, listened in silence as two merchants muttered nearby. "Clara Evans, poor soul," one whispered. "Married Henry Dalton, didn't she? Always thought that match ill-made." The other scoffed. "Dalton keeps up appearances. Brings his wife to church, speaks polite. Folks imagine more than they know." Edward pretended to study the apples on display, but his chest tightened. Dalton, a name he knew, a man with a polished smile and heavy handshakes, was Clara's husband. The thought coiled unpleasantly in his gut. He had seen men like Dalton before, smooth in public, harsh in private. When he returned to the manor, the kitchen once again hummed with Clara's steady movements. Yet he noticed the stiffness in her shoulders, the way she flinched when a pot clattered too loudly. Lily sat at the table, tracing patterns on the wood with a fingertip, silent as stone. Edward cleared his throat. "If there is trouble in your home, Clara, you must know you are not without allies." Clara froze, then turned, her face pale. "Please, sir, do not trouble yourself. It is nothing." Her denial was sharper this time, tinged with fear. Edward felt the door closing between them, yet he knew the truth pressed heavily behind it. He did not push further. To do so might only drive her deeper into silence. That night he walked the estate grounds restlessly, the chill air biting through his coat. He thought of Margaret again, of her gentleness, her insistence on kindness even when society turned cruel. He remembered the way she would take in stray cats, injured birds, creatures most would dismiss as burdens. She had believed mercy was the truest measure of a soul. And here he was, with two bruised lives in his very household, turning his gaze away because it was easier. The thought unsettled him deeply. When he re-entered the manor, he passed the kitchen once more. Through the half-open door, he glimpsed Clara seated at the table, her head bowed into her hands. Lily stood behind her, small arms wrapped around her mother's shoulders in a silent gesture of comfort. The scene pierced him, two lives bound together in quiet suffering, clinging only to each other. Edward closed the door softly and stepped back into the darkened hall. His mind had settled. He could no longer remain a passive witness. Something had to be done, though he could not yet see how without tearing the fragile order of their lives apart. Yet one truth weighed heavier than all others. Clara was not merely his cook, nor Lily merely his servant's child. They were human beings enduring a cruelty the world refused to name. And Edward Whitmore, for the first time in years, felt his long-dormant heart stir with purpose. Whispers of affection. The following week passed with a heaviness that Edward could not ignore. The bruises he had noticed on Clara and Lily lingered in his mind as if branded there. Each time he entered the kitchen, he watched them more closely, not as master to servant, but as man to fellow sufferer. Clara tried to move about with her usual quiet diligence, yet there was a stiffness in her step and a shadow in her gaze that betrayed the burden she carried. Edward began lingering near the kitchen longer than usual, under the pretense of checking household accounts or tasting Clara's cooking. In truth, he sought any glimpse into the silent world she kept locked away. More than once, he caught Lily studying him with wary eyes, as though measuring whether he was truly friend or foe. One evening, the air heavy with the promise of rain, Edward found Clara alone by the scullery window. The storm clouds rolled in, darkening the manor with a premature twilight. Clara stood still, her hands folded before her apron, her eyes fixed on nothing. "Clara," Edward said softly, careful not to startle her. "Does he treat you harshly?" She turned, startled indeed, and for a moment her composure faltered. Then she forced a faint smile. "You've a kind heart, sir, but it is not your worry. I can manage my affairs." Her words were firm, but her voice trembled. Edward stepped no closer, respecting the barrier she clung to. Yet in her face he saw exhaustion deeper than physical toil, the exhaustion of a woman carrying more than she could bear. "You needn't manage alone," he said, his tone low, weighted with sincerity. The silence between them stretched until the first drops of rain tapped the window. Clara lowered her gaze, her hands tightening over each other as though binding herself in restraint. At last, she whispered, "Kindness is dangerous, sir. It stays hopes that cannot survive in this town." Before Edward could answer, Lily entered, carrying a bundle of herbs. The girl's sharp eyes darted between them, sensing something unspoken. She busied herself at the table, but Edward caught the way she pressed closer to her mother, her loyalty fierce despite her youth. That night, word spread through the town's tavern like spilled wine. "Whitmore lingers too long with his cook. Perhaps loneliness has loosened his restraint." By morning, whispers threaded through the marketplace and church pews alike. Clara's name became entangled with Edward's in tones of disapproval, though no proof existed beyond suspicious minds. Clara heard the rumors first, brought to her by a pitying neighbor at the well. When she returned to the manor, she could scarcely meet Edward's gaze. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, not at what was true, but at what others invented. "I should leave your service," she told him quietly while Lily fetched water. "The town already condemns me. It will stain your good name, sir." Edward's response came swiftly, firmer than she expected. "No, Clara. You and Lily will remain here. I will not cast you out because the town cannot bridle its tongue." His certainty startled her. 4 years she had endured silence and suspicion, never once defended so openly. She met his eyes then, and for the first time, there was no mask of servant and master, only two souls bound by a secret understanding. Days later, Edward found himself drawn to the kitchen late in the evening. The fire burned low, casting soft light over Clara as she sat mending one of Lily's dresses. He hesitated at the doorway, unwilling to intrude, yet unable to leave. Clara looked up, and though fatigue marked her face, there was also warmth, a flicker of trust. "Sit, if you wish," she said, her voice gentle. He did, and so began a quiet ritual, nights spent in conversation by the kitchen hearth. They spoke of Lily's schooling, of Margaret's memory, of books and gardens and the simplest dreams. No bold words of affection were exchanged, yet the air between them thickened with an intimacy that neither dared name. For Clara, these moments were both balm and torment. In Edward's presence, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Yet guilt gnawed at her, for she remained bound to Henry Dalton, and the town's whispers already painted her as faithless. To indulge in Edward's kindness was to feed both heart and scandal. For Edward, the struggle was no less fierce. He knew that to reach for Clara risked ruin, yet every glance, every smile, deepened his resolve to protect her. Loneliness had carved hollows in him, but Clara's presence filled them with quiet light. One evening, as Lily dozed by the fire, Edward and Clara exchanged a glance that lingered too long. Neither spoke, but something passed between them, an unspoken confession that the heart had already chosen its path, regardless of consequence. Edward rose to leave, yet paused at the doorway. His hand rested on the frame, his voice low. "You deserve safety, Clara. You deserve peace. Whatever comes, I will see that you have it." Clara's breath caught, her eyes glistening in the dim light. She said nothing, but the faintest nod told him she had heard not just his words, but the vow behind them. The fire crackled softly, and Lily stirred in her sleep. Edward stepped into the hall, his heart heavy with both dread and longing. He knew the storm gathering outside their fragile circle would soon break. And when it did, no one, not Clara, not Lily, not even himself, would remain untouched. The breaking point. The autumn sun sank early, staining the horizon with copper and crimson as Edward crossed the manor's courtyard. The air was sharp, carrying the smell of damp earth. Inside, however, a storm brewed greater than any shifting season. Clara had grown quieter in recent days, her movements brittle, her eyes fixed too often on the ground. Even Lily, once cautiously bright in Edward's presence, now drifted about like a shadow. That evening, Edward found Clara in the pantry, her sleeve pushed back as she reached for a jar. The light revealed bruises scattered across her arm, fresh and angry. His breath tightened. "Clara," he said, his tone clipped with controlled fury. "Do not tell me you stumbled again." She froze, the jar trembling in her hands before she set it down. Her silence was answer enough. "It is Dalton," Edward pressed. "He does this." Her shoulders stiffened. "Please, sir, do not." "Does he lay his hand on you? On Lily?" His voice rose, more than he intended. Tears welled in her eyes, and at last her resistance cracked. She leaned against the shelf, shaking. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, he does. And there is no escape. If I leave, the town will turn its back. They would call me ungrateful, sinful, faithless. I cannot bear that shame for Lily's sake." Edward stepped closer, though careful not to touch her. His anger was no longer only for Dalton. It seethed also at the hypocrisy of a town that would condemn a woman's imagined unfaithfulness yet remain blind to her bruises. "You are not faithless," he said, voice steady now. "You are surviving, and I will not stand by while that man destroys you." Her lips parted as though to argue, but no words came. Instead, Clara bowed her head, trembling under the weight of a truth long buried. For the first time, she allowed him to share her burden. In the following days, Edward's resolve hardened. He kept his watchful eyes on Clara and Lily, offering them small kindnesses, an extra fire in the servants' quarters. Lily's lessons moved into the warmth of the library. Each gesture deepened their bond, though it also fed the town's gossip. The whispers had grown into a low roar. In the taverns, in the church pews, in the market stalls, everywhere tongues wagged of Edward Whitmore's supposed affair with his cook. Clara bore the gossip with silent anguish. Edward, however, refused to yield. One night, when the household lay quiet, he joined Clara in the kitchen where the embers glowed low. Lily had gone to bed. The stillness wrapped them in fragile intimacy. "You cannot go on this way," Edward told her. "I have no choice," Clara replied, though her voice wavered. "Yes, you do. Come away from him. You and Lily both. Stay here, if you must, or I will find another home where no hand can harm you." Clara lifted her gaze, and for a breathless moment, their eyes locked. It was not gratitude she offered, nor merely fear. It was something deeper, something forbidden. She whispered, "If I stayed, it would not be only for safety." The admission struck him like lightning. His heart surged with both desire and dread. For though neither had spoken of love, it hung between them now, undeniable. Edward reached for her hand, his touch gentle, hesitant, yet lingering. "Clara," he murmured, "you deserve more than survival. You deserve to live." The moment stretched, fragile and dangerous. Clara did not pull away. Her silence was consent enough, a quiet surrender to the hope she had long denied herself. But the fragile stillness shattered days later. Henry Dalton arrived at the manor unannounced, his boots thundering against the marble floor. His smile was wide, his tone smooth, but his eyes burned with suspicion. "I hear my wife and child are well kept here," he said, too pleasantly, as Edward greeted him in the entry hall. "Perhaps better kept than they are in my own house." Edward met his stare, unflinching. "They are safe here, Dalton, which is more than can be said of your care." The mask slipped then. Dalton's smile twisted, and his hand clenched at his side. "Mind yourself, Whitmore. You meddle in matters that are not yours." "It became mine," Edward answered coldly, "the moment I saw the bruises you left on them." The words hung like a gauntlet thrown. Behind them, Clara appeared, Lily clinging to her skate. Dalton's gaze flicked to them, venomous, and for the first time Clara did not shrink. She stood firm, though pale, her hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. The silence crackled until Dalton stepped closer, his voice a low snarl. "You will regret this." Edward did not flinch. "Perhaps, but I will not regret protecting them." The confrontation ended with Dalton storming out, but Edward knew this was only the beginning. The town would soon hear of the clash, and scandal would swell like wildfire. Yet as he looked at Clara and Lily, trembling but unbroken, he felt the weight of his choice settle into certainty. The breaking point had come. There was no returning to silence, no retreat to ignorance. The path forward would be perilous, paved with judgment and sacrifice. But Edward knew, with a clarity sharp as steel, that he would walk it, for them. The unforgiven. The days following Dalton's outburst weighed heavy upon the town. Rumors, once whispers, now rang like bells in every shop and square. Edward Whitmore's name was on every tongue, spoken with disapproval, pity, or scorn. To most, he was no longer the respected widower but a man who had entangled himself in scandal with another man's wife. Clara bore the brunt of it more cruelly. Women at the well turned their backs, voices dropping as she passed. Neighbors who once smiled now crossed the street, clutching their baskets as though her presence tainted them. Lily felt it too. At school, the other children whispered, their taunts sharp as stones. The bruises had faded from her skin, but fresh wounds formed in her spirit. Inside the manor, however, a fragile peace had taken root. Edward insisted Clara and Lily remain under his protection. He made no pretense before the servants or the town. "They are safe here," he declared simply, and that was that. For the first time in years, Clara slept without fear of footsteps pounding on her door. For the first time, Lily laughed without glancing over her shoulder. But safety came at a price. The more Edward sheltered them, the more vicious the gossip grew. People called Clara faithless, Edward dishonorable, and Lily the child of shame. It mattered little that Dalton's cruelty had left marks. The town saw only what it wished to see: an affair, a betrayal, a scandal fit for endless retelling. One evening, Clara sat with Edward in the library. The lamplight soughed upon their faces. Books lined the walls, silent witnesses to the conversation neither wished to begin. "I fear we have traded one prison for another," she murmured, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "We are free from his blows, but chained by the town's judgment." Edward leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Let them talk. Their words cannot harm you as he did." She met his eyes, sorrow deepening the lines at their corners. "Words can wound, Edward. They wound Lily already, and they wound you. Your name, your honor, is being dragged through filth for my sake." He reached for her hand, holding it gently yet firmly. "What is honor worth, if it demands silence in the face of cruelty? Let them strip it from me. I would sooner lose reputation than live knowing I abandoned you." Clara's breath shivered in her throat. She had long since ceased denying her feelings, though she spoke of them rarely. His words steadied her, yet fear lingered. Could they truly build a life on the ashes of scandal? The question answered itself soon enough. A week later, Dalton appeared at the church steps, declaring loudly that his wife had forsaken him, that Edward Whitmore had stolen her away. The congregation, already primed with suspicion, erupted in outrage. Some called for Clara's return to her rightful husband. Others condemned Edward outright, muttering of sin and shame. Edward did not attend that service, but word of it reached him swiftly. When Clara heard, her face paled to ash. "He will not stop," she whispered. "He will drag us through every street until we are broken." Edward placed a hand upon her shoulder. "Then let us leave this town behind. We can begin anew, somewhere." His voice holds no sway. For a long moment, Clara said nothing. At last, she shook her head. "Even if we go, Edward, the stain remains. The world is quick to forgive men their sins, but women are never absolved of imagined ones. Wherever we go, I will be remembered not as a woman who endured, but as one who betrayed." Her words cut him, for he knew their truth. Yet when he looked upon her, and upon Lily asleep in the next room, he felt his resolve deepen. "Then we will carry that burden together. I will not let you bear it alone." The decision was made quietly, without grand farewell. One morning before dawn, Edward, Clara, and Lily left Whitmore Manor behind. The road stretched before them, uncertain and unwelcoming, but free of Dalton's reach. Years would pass before the town spoke of Edward Whitmore with anything other than disdain. In their telling, he was the man who cast aside honor for forbidden love, the man who meddled in another household, the man who could never be forgiven. Clara remained, in their memory, a faithless wife. Lily, the girl touched by scandal. Yet beyond those narrow streets, in the quiet of a distant countryside, another truth endured. Lily grew with laughter returned to her voice. Clara, though scarred by judgment, found gentleness in Edward's steadfast care. And Edward himself discovered something far greater than the hollow respect of neighbors. He discovered the peace that comes when one chooses compassion over reputation. In the end, the town never forgave what he did. But Clara and Lily never forgot that he had saved them. And for Edward, that was enough.